Hello everybody, welcome back to the Grand Torino. Delighted to introduce to you my next guest, John Connors. John,
Thanks for having me, man.
thanks for agreeing to come on to the Grand Torino.
No bother at all. Been looking forward to it.
Me too, it's a long time in the making. We were fishing around with some other ideas earlier on, but we'll play with that. I think we're going to get down to the meat and bones of a lot of subjects. Before I get started with John, we'll give you the usual. Please don't forget to press the like button, the subscribe button and the little blue bell, and you'll be reminded of future conversations here in the Grand Torino. And I'm very excited to have this conversation, hence why I'm so animated, because there's a bit of a brain transfer already happening.
Yeah.
John, for my audience abroad in the United States and around the world, and all our fellow Irish diaspora that's stuck abroad and can't come home to this country because we can't give them a country, just give us a brief background to you. You know, people in Ireland are very well aware of who you are, but for my American audience.
So I was born in London to an Irish mother and father. Actually, I have a little funny story about that, why I was born in London, so I might as well just get into it, right? Basically, my mother and father were engaged and we got aged. So I'm an Irish traveller, so travellers get engaged very young, get married very young. And they were engaged for about 2 years and they didn't want it to go on any longer, obviously, but my father had a mental health condition from a very young age and he hijacked a taxi. He was about 18, and he crashed and broke his hip and he was put on armed guard in the hospital. And he was going to be facing 2 or 3 years. So my mother went in and escaped him out the window, and they escaped to England basically, and that's why I was born in London. And to this day my brother slagged me over being born in England, but because I was born in England I became extra Irish in culture, in my history, and obsessed with it. And I grew up in a Camp Lane where there was like, we had about 40 of the cousins were born in England and about 40 were in Ireland.
Now I'm going to ask you, because you're getting excited, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to slow it down.
Yeah.
Because for my American audience, we speak very fast.
That's right. Actually, every time I go over there, I have to be told to slow.
Yeah,
right
we
down.
have to bring it down because I want this to go.
So I grew up around Coolock for most of my life, moved around a few different places, and I ended up living in Darndale for a few years, which was in a house, this is still Darndale really, but it's not a house. That was a nightmare for me, and I ended up getting in a really bad depression and becoming suicidal and stuff. And basically, I found a way, which was acting. My brother suggested acting, and I fell in love with acting, and it was an introduction into a different world that I never knew existed. Yeah. So I became an actor, the second ever traveller actor, and I found a lot of pushback in the industry. I couldn't get an agent, couldn't get a casting director. No one wanted to see me for an audition, and I think there was a lot of different stuff going on. I think they just couldn't get past the fact that I was a traveller, so they couldn't see me in many other roles. I think there was a bit of a mixture of a conscious bias and an unconscious bias. But despite that, I've always been kind of a roll up your sleeves kind of fella, and that's the culture I come from. So I said I'm going to do something myself, and I started writing myself, and I wrote Cardboard Gangsters, which was a film that was a huge hit, the biggest box office hit of the year in Ireland, and won many awards.
Fantastic film, congratulations, well done.
And I finally won the IFTA then up on the stage, and I took that opportunity to criticise class in Ireland, to criticise the film industry, and it's because that's the epitome of classism, is the film industry above all else. It's all about who you know.
I agree, 100%.
So I took that opportunity, and I suppose once I got into the spotlight after I did Love Hate, which kind of put me into
your platform group.
Yeah, it grew massively. I started being, like every other actor in it, was being asked questions like, what's your ultimate Hollywood role, or who would you like to go to dinner with, and all this, and I was being asked to account for this traveller crime or whatever, this, that, the other. So I was always been put on the defensive. Now I come from a very proud family, the first ever traveller activist, the Dunn, who was my grandmother, and they're great people, so I had all that growing up anyway. So once they put the camera on me and started asking me questions, I started fighting back. People liked it, people didn't like it, and I've never minced my words, and I've never betrayed my beliefs to this day, and it's got me in a lot of trouble, personally and professionally, but I am who I am.
100% agree. As you finish on there, someone was speaking with me on Twitter. Just reminded me of Al Porter's situation. Do you remember when Al Porter spoke on RT and he spoke out about the corruption in this Ireland? He was very, very articulate. Yeah. But he laid out a lot of truth bombs. Yeah. And that didn't go with RTE's. That didn't go with RTE's agenda. Is what I'm saying. Yeah. Al's kind of disappearing off the scene. They don't like what Al's saying. Yeah.
Well, with RTE, sure, I went on RTE and said that RTE don't allow fair elections. And to be fair to RTE, I thought I was never going to be allowed back again on RTE. and everybody on Twitter thought the same, but I was actually invited back to go back again after that. I think
They were just checking in.
I think I'm the
see
token
if you
traveller.
change your mind.
You know, even with I went on the Late Late Show a few times. The second time I went on with a long Kesh t-shirt because I'm a proud Irish Republican. I believe in the reunification of Ireland. I believe in the freedom of Ireland and freedom from Europe too. And I did that, and Ryan Tubridy kind of took nearly a bit of a heart attack like that, to anything like that. But you know,
that fella wilt.
Well, he's anything, stay away from controversy is their thing. And then I went back on again. Actually, the third time they asked me, and I called the Gardaí who were involved in the evictions in North Frederick Street scum. But of course, everybody else conflate that with I called all Gardaí scum. You know, so there seems to be controversy seems to follow me because I think I like to tell the truth, and we live in such a I don't know, like civilized society now. No one likes to hear the truth. Yeah, PC. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I've got myself in a lot of trouble. But listen, what can you do? I don't allow people to dictate my behaviour. I remember when I announced I was coming on here a while back, and since then I'm out of a lot of trouble. I mean, you talked about personal issues going on with my family, but because of actually what's happening with my family, having talks like this is even more important to me now. Realising that I have a voice and to use it, and to don't let no one stop me from speaking. And I remember when I said I was coming onto your show, Donald Kelly, who's an actor and an activist, a man who I would have previously respected. He's a pro-Palestinian activist and did Republican stuff back in the day, and I'd have respect for this man. I met him only once though, but he seemed like a decent fellow. What he seemed like to me was an old school liberal who actually believed in freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff, and it didn't exaggerate things. You know, like nowadays how people shut you down and call you racist or fascist or misogynist.
Oh yeah, I do.
And which I think that's so annoying because they're taken away from real racists and fascists and all that, so on and whatever. And he said to me, he actually put out a tweet hinting at me saying people I previously respected activists turn into fascism. So because I agreed to sit down and talk to you, who I know you're not a fascist, you're right wing, people are left wing, it doesn't matter. I'm suddenly a fascist for agreeing to talking to you. So he uses the new leftist like cuntflake ideology, basically that sort of tactic he's using to stop me from that, and actually insulted me as well, saying check your ego and all this sort of stuff. And you see, it is kind of frustrating for me to deal with that at times, because I grew up, and this might sound barbaric to some cuntflakes out there, but I grew up in a culture where there's consequences to your words, and you have to stand up and be a man. And when you try to smear somebody and defame them like that, because that's very serious what he was doing to me, right? You have to stand up and be accounted for. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, you're going to be found out. That's what happens in my culture. Mm-hmm. You have to go out to the road and you have to box the face off each other. That's what happens. Really? And there's nothing wrong with that. And I totally love that part of our culture. So it's frustrating when you get someone like Donald who's trying to defame my name and character, a person who I've always been anti-racist because of discrimination I've faced all my life. And then with one sweep, they're trying to just ruin you and ruin your career. Just like what happened with the abortion referendum, the exact same thing.
I'm gonna keep the conversation steered at my American audience, because our Irish audience will be aware of the events and they'll understand. But just to kind of expand on it, John spoke out about the abortion. We were repeal the 8th, which we had in the referendum here not so long ago, and I think many people were taken quite by surprise that would be familiar with you and never expected you to come out. But you used that platform in the defence of children. Yeah. You know, because, and the Constitution, I believe also that you were out defending the Constitution as well, because what's transpired since then, just to explain to American audiences, not only have they repealed the 8th, but what they do is they've inserted 2 more sneaky clauses that even the people that voted for repeal the 8th are now saying is barbaric.
Of course.
Like the lack of
it'd be a different vote if it was done now again, I believe.
Can you imagine it? And I just want to finish that point, that the lack of anaesthesia for the fetus during a procedure of abortion is, to me, criminal.
That's barbaric. So it's happened recently in New York, where you can now kill a baby outside of the womb. What is happening here? What is happening? What are they trying to do in this country? Like,
now, I don't want to steer. I am going to steer our conversation. I spoke to you earlier on about the new curriculum that's being introduced into Irish schools, into the mainstream curriculum that's being pushed forward through. And if anyone's following with the channel, and I know most of you are, you'll see this. The story that I'm leading up to here again is with the transgenderism. Because I noticed again today that the glitter hole situation in the public library is still bubbling away. It hasn't gone away. Yeah. And a lot of parents have come out and said, hang on a minute, this is wrong. This is the public taxpayer, regardless. This indoctrination of children at the taxpayer's expense, when the taxpayers, not all taxpayers agree with what's being done, but this is coming up through now that it's recently been found out, and I've had a lot of parents, a lot of men, now not only friends but acquaintances saying, are you aware of this? Have you seen this? And I'm going out of my mind. I don't know what, I feel like chaining myself to the doll, because I do not want my children to be taught this. And the curriculum is between, and you open to fact check and correct me if I'm wrong, but between 0 and 4, sex education for minor children with the inclusion of sexual pleasure for children at 2 years of age. Now this is the kind of ethos that's coming from the LGBT community. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That to me is stepping too far, because we're creeping towards paedophilia and an acceptance of paedophilia.
Okay, so I didn't even know about that. That's crazy. We actually are living in a crazy country, but I already figured that out anyway. The whole LGBT thing, that's not something that is a fight for me, because I was pro-marriage equality. I campaigned for it. Got criticised by Travers because of it. Travers Online or whatever. And if you go back to Gaelic Ireland pre-colonisation, it was okay and accepted to be gay.
Love it, John, love it.
Yeah, it was accepted to be gay back in Gaelic Ireland. Forget about Catholicism, what that done to us.
Yep.
So I go back further than that. Now my family are devout Catholics, and I respect that. And to me, there's a difference between the Catholicism as a religion and the church. The church is an organisation just like Google or Facebook. They're tax-free.
Priests are men.
They're even more tax-free than them. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
So I'm anti-Catholic Church, not anti-Catholicism, not anti-Christianity or any religion really. Although I'd like to see an end to this all religion, because I think they're just stupid. That's being honest. I believe in God. I believe there's a higher power. I believe there's a grand design. I do believe in that. I do believe if you do bad is coming back at you, and you do good, because I've seen it in my own life and it's proven. The whole LGBT thing, for me personally, if I had kids, I don't want them having sex education, gay, straight, masturbation, nothing. I think that's the parents, and maybe that's me being a bit traditional in my traveller roots, but that the mother and father's job is to educate children about that kind of stuff. That's my opinion on it. I don't think any of that should be brought in. Going back to the abortion thing, because I wanted to talk about that for a bit.
Go ahead.
How I was laying on the sidelines for a little bit of it, because I'm not going to lie, and it's not like me, I was a bit afraid, because I knew I was going to come back, right? And my family were telling me not to get involved. You know, my family were all staunchly pro-life. But I kept saying, I consult my family, I asked them, I looked for opinions and whatever, right? And I finally asked my brother Parky, and he just said, go for it, you know? Because I seen a video of a bunch of Irish actors and singers and so-called Z-list celebrities, right? All having their opinion about a woman's right to choose. A sentence they never like to finish. To choose what? What is the right to choose? An abortion. What's an abortion? What is it? What is it? It's what it is as a fact is it's taking a life. We know that. Now, we can call the life a fetus or a baby if you want, right? So I said, I'm not having this anymore. All I did was I put up a picture saying pro-life. That's it. Nothing else. I had about 2,000 comments in a day. Wow. Mostly negative, because a lot of online is mostly people who are more liberal or whatever, right? And I would have considered myself a bit of a lefty, but never really comfortable with giving myself a label either. Now I wouldn't give myself left or right anymore. Just talking about issues, one-on-one. That's the way I like to do it. So the hate I was getting was unbelievable. People I knew who I would not say friends, but very friendly with, coming after me publicly. And then I put it on Twitter, and all these Z-list celebrities again quoting and retweeting me with their little witty rebuttal virtue signal cunts. Yeah. That's all they were, right? Yeah. And making me out to be the bad guy who has no compassion for a woman's right to choose. To choose what? They don't like finishing that sentence. So I sort of doubled down. Now, people, before I get there actually, people who were considering themselves activists, right? Because you buy a repeal top, you become an activist. An activist because you've done work to become an activist. And
you should be proud of that.
You're out in the streets sharing and doing all that. Sorry, yeah, that's great. In their bios on Twitter, calling themselves human rights activists, they were calling me pikey and knacker. This is the liberal left. The tolerant liberal left.
Going back to form. You know, going back to form.
They're totally... This is what I notice about the left in general, right? And I'd say liberals are different, because a liberal is a liberal, and we have to kind of distinguish with the new left that are coming through. They've extreme empathy for subjects until you disagree with them. Yep. And they believe in equality until you disagree with them. Yep. You disagree with them, it's hate and apathy. They're the exact opposite of what they're meant to represent. So I've seen loads of that. I was getting constant hate. I remember one tweet from someone with a repeal top, telling me, I hope it goes through so traveller children can be aborted. Right?
Fuck.
Honest to God, that's what she said, right?
I believe that.
That's what she said. Like we already have a high infant mortality rate just because of the conditions we live in. We have a highest suicide rate in the world per capita of any people. 11% of travellers die by suicide. My own father committed suicide. We have a problem with our population, even though we still have we still procreate more than average, but people are dying so young all the time. And she's coming out with stuff like that, and she's meant to be tolerant and liberal, and even someone the other day bringing it up on Twitter and telling me, and women's healthcare. What are you on about women's healthcare? Women's healthcare is going getting hopefully a cervical check that's going to be right and correct. That's what women's healthcare is, not aborting a baby inside them, a life inside them. And she says travellers are the most, travel women are the most vulnerable. So she was putting it away like she was supporting travellers, but we're too dumb to realise that we did what was bad for us was voting pro-life. You know, this sort of patronising racism really, or discrimination, that's what that is. So that was the start of it all. Online I got attacked left, right and centre, everybody. And then a couple of actually good friends of mine attacked me, which that did hurt me. I couldn't believe it.
Out of the blue.
Publicly, using a public platform to do it to me.
Not the Mahalis to come up and ring you on the phone.
Whereas I had people like Frankie Gaffney, who I talked to you earlier on. Frankie Gaffney, who's a self-described communist, but who's against identity politics. He's anti-PC, and he was pro-choice. And me and him were able to have a conversation on the phone together, and not get aggressive with each other. And he totally understood my position.
Reason.
He totally understood my position. I understood his. I said,
well, he understood that his words have consequences. Yeah. That's what Logos is.
And listen, this fella's from town, so he did understand. Because he's a working class fella, and he understands that you do get into aggression, and that's
where I think people are missing the point in Twitter, where they're the keyboard smears and the shit. In the real world, when you walk the streets, Logos matters. Your words have consequences.
Well, you see, they like to hide behind shit in Twitter. So the other day, a fella was, for 1 year, almost every week he called me a knacker or pikey, a fat this, that and the other. And every time he met up the same thing saying, you and a bunch of travellers broke up this hotel in Carlow 1 week it was Dundalk another week, it was this another week, and it was never the place where he was from, which I later found out where he's from because I tracked him down after years. I'd have enough of this. I put it out there, said, can anybody find this man for me? Found out he was in Cork, found out his name, his everything. And then when I tweeted him, then what happened? Radio silence. Then he reported me, then he blocked me, then he deleted all his social media. That's the real world, because he knew there was going to be consequence. So I thought that was bad enough, all that like constant attack. I couldn't sign into my Twitter because I was getting so many notifications, my phone was freezing and my app was stalling. Right, that's how bad it was. Vast majority hate against me, vast majority pro-choice people. So I thought that was bad enough. And then what happened was, over the next couple of weeks, I had 10 speaking gigs planned, and they were all cancelled all around the world, country, because I have these speaking gigs that I do to just keep me going, right? For money, like, and talk about mental health, talk about my life, talk about acting, whatever, Q&A kind of sessions I do, all cancelled within 2 weeks. So okay, that's bad enough. 2 roles that I got, and I'll tell you, I'm not going to go after the network because I need to be at least smart about that, right? I'll tell you afterwards. But 2, one was a feature-length film, one was a 3-part series. One of them was the biggest role I would have gotten to date, and it was outside of Ireland. It was a huge role. Both of them cancelled. And I found out exactly what it was for, because the casting director was actually pro-life, and the network behind it told her the reason, unbeknownst to everybody else, and then she slyly told my agent, and slyly told me, and all this kind of thing. So that's what happened to me. So that's actually sent me through a few months of depression, actually, because I went, all right, this is just a load of bollocks now and whatever. And then after a few months, everything died down, and I just realised, I looked back on that time and I said, okay, at least no matter what, I can look back and say I kept my dignity and my pride, and I stood up for the most vulnerable life on planet Earth that there is, and I can sleep. So that's where I'm at with that, basically, you know.
Jeez, John, sorry, I have so many interjection points there to jump back in with. We spoke. I wanted to get across the Logos, even as you spoke on the Twitter, even you speaking out with your opinion, that has consequences.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's affected your career now. Yeah. So as I made the comparison with Al Porter, people that have a not a polar opposite position, but had the cojones to express an opinion. Yeah. Even though they're in the entertainment industry. Yeah. Now we have to realise that the entertainment industry is starting to pull strings. They will only have the voices on that agree with their, of course, with their whatever. Let's
And
just
it's
call
been
it.
media shut down for me since. That's the gas since then. Do you know, before that, I had journalists begging me for interviews.
Oh, yeah.
Begging me. Now, I get on podcasts all the time, you know. But like in terms of like the mainstream media, none of them want to talk to me, which I never wanted to talk to them anyway, so that's cool with me.
But talk to me
it's not.
quickly while we're talking about that, about the podcast idea that you have. That this is the new social media that what RT and RTM failed to realise.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is taking the power back into your hands. So me and my friend of mine, Teddy Darlin, he's actually a rapper. He's from Darndale, and his nickname is God Creative. That's his moniker because he's so creative. He does kind of everything, you know. And he's non-political. He wouldn't even know left versus right politics. So we're doing a podcast called The Traveller and Settler, and I'll be sort of political voice in it. He'll be the sort of funny pop culture voice in it. We're getting different guests on, and just doing our own thing, man. Basically, you know.
100%.
And
When is that ready to launch, do you think?
Next few weeks we're going to start it, so yeah, we're just going to have our own platform, man, and use that platform to talk about what we want to do. And guess I wanted to come on, and no one will ever censor me. That's the main thing, you know.
100%, brother. 100%. We spoke about the LGBT thing, which is looming on the horizon. You also mentioned Europe. Well, and you don't represent the whole of the traveller community, or that's not why we're here. Oh yeah, the conversation I had with the gentleman down in Cortown. I don't know if you got a chance to watch that interview that we said.
No.
But that's why I brought it up, because I knew people on the traveller community and people in the settled community, there's going to be a conflation of that spiel, and I think this is a perfect position, time to expand on that, the perception that settlers have of travellers and the perception of travellers to settlement. And what I want to lead that with is I want to elevate up above that. I think that's a separation, that's a political tool to separate us, because I believe
Totally.
the complete logos of the travelling community, that you are strong family members, you're
Family obsessed.
family obsessed.
If I'm in trouble, right, so let me go into this, right, because I know where you're going anyway now. If I'm in trouble, this is still to this day, right, if I'm in trouble, it doesn't matter whether it is where it's a gangster, which it often has been, and I can tell you stories about that where I've gotten in trouble with gangsters back in the day in Darndale. I will have 100 family members at my door. And the way we act is, I would not call any of them, because that's even belittling myself. That's the way we behave with each other. They have to come to me to show their loyalty. I have to come to them to show my loyalty. We stick together. Because we're stronger together. That's what we believe in, right? To talk about travel, I want to give some context to our history in relation to Ireland, and the kind of misconceptions around our history and our culture and our origin, where we come from. Because a lot of your listeners would not have heard anything like this, because there's been certain narratives that were given to travellers in order to justify assimilating us. This is going back to the formation of the Irish Free State, but I want to go back way further than that, okay? So if we go back to about 500 years ago, just before the reconquest of Ireland, Ireland was 2/3 nomadic, okay? So traditionally Irish people were nomadic. That's what we done. We were called the Wandering Irish, not just to the British, but to the whole of Europe. That's what kind of made us a bit different, you know? Most of the people who were settled at that particular point were more aristocrats and Normans and different people who were appointed, and Anglo-Catholics and whatever. And most of the 2/3 were completely nomadic or semi-nomadic, and herd cattles and bards, and people are on the road all the time, right? So that was kind of Irish culture. And what happened was the reconquest of Ireland came in. Now I did a 3-part series on it, if anybody's ever interested.
Yeah,
it's called John Connor's The Travellers.
I'll put it in the description box in the
So
notes.
it's in the RTI player, and it's a 3-part series.
I don't want to put people towards there.
I know, that's the thing, but it's really good work they done, you know. So basically there was the reconquest of Ireland, and what that was all about was the British needed to de-Gaelicize Ireland, right? And that's how you were going to get them to settle. Number one, if you were travelling and you were nomadic, you weren't paying taxes. But also you couldn't assimilate into their culture, because nomadism was a vehicle in which to protect Gaelic culture.
Love it.
Okay? So then there was a 9-decade period, and in this documentary I talked to the experts of that era, and these are Trinity trained historians who would have a very anglicised point of view towards Irish culture going back then, and this is coming from then. So there was a 9-decade period during the reconquest where there was martial law brought in, and in the martial law prescriptions, the local sheriffs had any people who were travelling nomadic, they could kill them on the spot and take what they wanted off them, and they could keep 33% and give the rest to king or queen. Okay, so there was a huge incentive to stop people from travelling. And then fear started to go through the Irish people, and people started to settle and stopped travelling because it was illegal. And this wasn't just in Ireland. All across the British Empire, any nomadic tribes, like the Bedouin people in the kind of sort of Arab world, they were all killed and slaughtered. Anybody who were nomadic tribes, and there were plenty of them. So this period ended, and the vast majority of Irish people were settled, but there was still a nomadic group of people that continued on travelling, and that became the people we now know as travellers. Okay, so then when the Irish Free State was formed, our politicians were looking to rebuild Ireland, and they thought about the things that might deter foreign investment, and one of the things at the top of the list to deter foreign investment was the ugly image of the tinker in the countryside. Yeah. That was something that's quoted from a Dáil Éireann record thing. We went through, it's in the documentary anyway. It was one senior politician and minister talked about that and said we have to do something about that.
Yeah. So
what happened was they started bringing in various different laws and acts and policies and vagrancy laws targeting travellers in order to get them to settle. And they start. If you were to, I went to UCD archive. Certain people who were questioned about the origins of travellers 100 years ago, vast majority said they came from, they descended from Gaelic kings, right?
Yeah.
But what happened was the government needed a new narrative, and they created a narrative that we came from the famine. And the reason why they created the narrative that we came from the famine is because it was easy to go, we're just resettling someone, not taking their culture away, which is nomadism, right? Yeah. Which is also taking away Irish culture. Do you understand? Yeah. So they used the same sort of tactics that was used by the British to all of us, to us, and to assimilate us, okay? And it wasn't working up until the 1963 report on itinerancy, and that was headed by Charlie Haughey. Now this was 18 years after Nazi Germany, and Charlie Haughey said, and I quote, "We are looking for the final solution with the itinerant problem."
You're joking me.
Yeah, and to save them from their itinerant habits.
And yet some people will still laud that man as a great leader.
As a hero.
Your words
as a working class hero. As a working class hero.
He lined his own, I said it in another previous broadcast. Well, they lined their pockets.
He created the blueprint for Bertie and
Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, the Nazis, the blue shorts, it's all the fuck.
They're two cheeks of the same arse. The exact same. So that happened, and there were suggestions made to that commission by politicians and by ministers, suggestions to deal with the itinerant problem. Some of the suggestions were take their children away from them so there's one less in the itinerant class. Other were to sterilise the women. Others was to castrate the men. Other suggestions were put them in Spike Island and let them breed out the whole entire population, right?
So now just that, I think exactly what you've just said in them 5 free statements. Forward that on to 20 years. Transfer that same strategy to what we're experiencing now.
Yeah.
Sterilisation of women.
Yeah.
The ruining of the family. Totally what they projected on the travel community. Which had to some degree as success, but you have the travelling community has maintained their traditions.
But even look at the different names they give us. The itinerant. It's not what we call each other. We're Minkir. Minkir is our language. Our language is an Irish language. I'll speak a bit to you. Stall the within a nosh. The fiend is gloating at the pure. Right. Not gonna tell you what that means because we want to keep our language.
See that blank expression on my face.
Yeah. So that happened in 1963. So the assimilation policies started coming in, and that changed the demographic, changed everything. They went to Holland and asked the council in Holland, in Amsterdam, and different cities, how do you deal with your native nomadic people? And what they said was how we dealt with them was we separated them. We put barriers between them and our settled community. We did this and we did that, and it didn't work out. And they started fighting. So don't do that. They were warned not to do that. Right? They went to the council in England and said, how do you deal with your gypsies over there? Because that time there was mostly just gypsies over there, and a small few Irish travellers who later became bigger population and kind of interbred with gypsies over there. And we'll talk about that as well and the differences. So they said what we use is a boulder technique, right? We'd go to all the campsites, because travel campsites were 300 years old, right? And they had names for them in our language. And they said we use the boulder and we block up all them. So they start doing that and block them up.
I've seen them, yeah, they do around the city here.
Around that time, travellers were not allowed to draw the dole, right? Because they were nomadic. But they were bribed by the government when plastic came in, and plastic ruined the tin spitting trade overnight. Because it was cheaper and quicker and blah, blah, blah. So the government seen this as an opportunity to settle the travellers. So they offered them the dole for the first time in their lives, but only a percentage of the dole. If they came to Dublin, which most travellers were rural people and never came to Dublin because they were afraid of Dublin, because since back under British rule, if you go to Dublin, the soldiers would take kids off you, rape, all this kind of stuff.
Still doing it now.
Yeah.
Still doing it now.
Exactly. So you had all this fear. So They were bribed to go to Dublin and settle, and all different travellers who never even travelled in the same routes together were just bunched together in these big sites, and they were given a percentage of the dole until they were settled for 18 months. And when they were settled for 18 months, they get the full dole, right? And
Sorry, the dole for my American
social
audience,
welfare.
Social welfare.
So they start making travellers dependent on the dole, which is one of the things that it's destroyed is that no one wants to talk about, and we became ghettoized, right? And every site was put on the edge of town. Like, look at this. This is the edge of Coolock, right? This was all country fields there. There's Fingal behind us. Every traveller site you will see or be confronted with is always the edge of town. So there's always a distance between us and settled people. So think about that even for your psyche. And I was very aware of that growing up. Why settled people over there and we're here and there's about a mile in between us, and there was always that. So when you go to school, there was always that. So this started a very destructive path for travellers, and overnight then, well, a couple of decades later, we started to see probably really bad problems with alcoholism and addiction, and suicide started to come in. And that happens with any nomadic people. That's a simple kind of anthropological thing where we see it with Aboriginal people, Native people who are settled.
100%.
They get suicide is a big thing, you know. So that started to happen, and I was sort of born into a culture that was already settled. I'm hearing about the good old days, and I'm hearing from the older travellers. They're not real travellers anymore. Although traveller was a name that was given to us, and it was a strategic name because it was meant to be. It was designed to make us believe that nomadism was our whole culture, when nomadism was only a way to protect our culture. You know, like if you look at what they're trying to destroy now, which is the last sort of form of Gaelic Ireland, which is the site here, and this is why. The site is the Tua, okay? So in Tuas, I'll explain to the American audience, a Tua was a clan, right? And Ireland was made up of a lot of clans. Maybe 1,000 years ago, maybe just before British colonialisation, we were made up of about 95 to 100 little kingdoms, and they were all different Tuas. And within the Tua, there was different septs and different names, and most of the Tuas would travel as well within a small area, and if you wanted to go to another Tua, you needed permission. And it was generally your cattle people who were going to trade, and the king would give them, you know. Yeah. So what we've kept was this thing of living around. So I grew up, the original side I grew up with 52 first cousins in my camp, 12 aunts and uncles, my grandparents, God knows how many second and third cousins.
Strong family.
And that was the Tua. And we're all living in the same camp, like the same camp.
Yeah.
So this is where we grew up. So that's why it was so hard when I moved into a house to experience this concrete jungle and no one around me and no support.
Yeah. I don't think not my audience, but people in general who've grown up in the concrete jungle that don't realise how much of a prison cell that they are. It
totally is. Well, it made me go into a real rabbit hole of depression, and I couldn't deal with it, you know. So that's sort of the world that I was born into, and then I went to school, and I was facing discrimination every day, and also I experienced bullying from travellers and settled people. I was getting bullied from travellers because my father committed suicide, and there was a real stigma towards that. I was getting bullied from settled people just because I was a traveller, who were being taught by their mother and father that to be travellers be bad. I even was called pikey by a teacher one time. I got a cone off his head, and anger was a major thing for me.
I'm reminded of a rhyme that was not taught to me, but was commonplace when I was younger, and it struck me when you said about the plastics decimating the tin trade for the travellers.
Yeah. And
the thing that was going around, the nursery rhyme type of thing, was if and ands were pots and pans, thinkers would be rich.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a transference of thought.
Yeah.
That was around at the time.
Yeah.
You know what I
mean?
mean?
Even that word tinker, right?
Yeah.
That's a word now that people say that's a bad word, and my grandmother calls herself a tinker because her father was a tinker. He was a tinsmith. Yeah. My grandfather out there, who's out there in the trailer now, his father was a tinsmith. That's what we were. We were tinkers. That's a way better name than a traveller.
Yeah.
Because a traveller was designed to settle us. You know what I mean? To go, that's all you have now, and that's over. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm cognizant of the time in a little bit, and I think there's obviously more conversations with us, you know.
Of course.
But you know how the YouTube works.
Yeah.
And I know some of my audience are going to say, well, why didn't you press John on your nomadic way of life, but look at the sites when you travel around Dublin and stuff like that. But I want to raise that conversation above direct this and that, because of the perception that the man in Cortown spoke about.
Yeah.
Is that they're all criminals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's the same sort of ethos that you can't brand everybody the same. We're all different and individual.
Well, even look back.
Look, my point being, sorry, John, is that the system in place, along with what I'm saying about the immigration, where it's designed to benefit a few at the cost of the many.
Yeah.
The same game plan that was happened through your people, because that is your history as you explained it to me. We don't get to hear that in our schools,
not at all.
or a different version of that. So, and people, I'm not going to say conspiratorial, but I'm saying that the plan is evolving, the gameplay is evolving to push us to break the family unit, but it's being ramped up, and I believe it's exposed itself too much. Because you got stung in the ass when you've expressed your pro-life opinion, and now we're moving on to the attack of children, which I think is going to grab most parents' attention. So I'm not going to answer all them questions. All them questions will be asked another thing. I want to round that conversation, this first one, John, because I believe there's going to be loads more. I want to thank you for coming on and explaining your situation. I want to thank you for giving...
Before we go, one thing I want to go for, Peter Casey. I want to speak about
100%.
Let me talk about Peter Casey, because I've seen some of your fans wanted to know about this, so I want to address that. So Peter Casey is a very peculiar man. First of all, I think he has brain damage, and I don't mean that to be smart. I genuinely think there's a cognitive problem going on, right? The funny thing is, people in the right now are cozying up to Peter Casey when Peter Casey was a self-described socialist after he gave them comments about travellers that time. And also, what wasn't reported in the media about these travellers turning down these houses in the middle of a homeless crisis.
That's right.
Obviously, that sounds... Yeah, but what wasn't reported, that was reported. What wasn't reported was the background to that story. Because obviously you hear that these travellers are not taking these little bungalows, and as a homeless crisis, you're going, fucking dickheads. I'd say the same, 100%. Sure, I've campaigned against homelessness for years and years. It's one of the most important issues of our day for me. Probably the most important, right? And this is where immigration comes into play in relation to that. And we'll get into that in a minute. But Peter Kay, what we weren't told was the travellers never wanted to move into that site. Said no to that site from day one, had their own site in a field like the way we live in, because most travellers don't even want a site, they want a field like this, where they had their horses and they had everything. They refused it from day one. They said okay, the council said okay, and we're building it for another family who then didn't want it either, and then they go, we don't want to go there. They didn't want to be moved. Now Peter Casey jumps on the bandwagon. He used a Donald Trump tactic, okay, which is stir people up with a bit of pinpoint something people are angry at. That's the tactic he used.
I don't believe that's the case, but I'm going to let you carry on.
I think he did anyway. So this is what he done. He said this, that and the other. Now he started talking as if he was back in the 70s, right? Which I'd love Peter Casey's idea of travellers. I'd love it. That'd be great, because Peter Casey starts saying, they move around and they go next to this farm and they settle there and we can't stop. Oh my God, Peter, if you're watching, I would love Ireland to be like that. Nomadism is outlawed for years. We're not allowed to travel. There's been policies and laws brought in to stop our nomadism. That's a great romantic view you have, and that must be the memory you have from Derry back in the day in the 70s, and before you bailed and went to America, gained an American accent and stopped paying taxes in this country, came back for the presidential election, took away your American accent. That's the idea you have for travellers. We wish it was like that we could move around free like that. We can't move around free like that. So he used that in order to gain points, and I actually predicted it the day before the election. I said he's going to finish second. I said his biggest mistake was, because I know the sentiment out there for travellers, his biggest mistake was he didn't lead with that from the start of his campaign, because he would have won. Trust me, he would have won. Because hate is a better motivator. And this is going to the Donald Trump thing. This is why I think I seen the Donald Trump thing. And I wouldn't be buying into Donald Trump's a fascist, because that's bollocks. Because again, you're taking power away from fascism, and he's a racist. I don't think he's a racist. I think he's seen an angle, you know what I mean? And the Muslim and the thing, that's why he would have been someone I couldn't have voted for, because of his rhetoric. Same way I wouldn't have voted for Hillary Clinton because she was a psychopath. I wanted peace over there. I was looking at Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, because he was anti-intervention, and I just don't want war all around the world, so that's why I would have wanted him. Even Jill Stein, because she was the same. It didn't really matter. What I want for the American president is being non-aggressive, right? And I think he took that tactic, and it turns out that Donald Trump is the least aggressive. His rhetoric is still aggressive, but he ain't invading any new countries. Obama brought America from 2 wars to 7 wars. Trump has yet to bring them into a new war. Success. That's a success story. And if Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize for nothing and turned out to be an absolute warlord worse than George Bush, well then obviously Trump would deserve it. Now I'm not saying he does, but by those standards he does. Still a man I wouldn't vote for. He's not for me and he doesn't hit all my policies. But that's just the truth of it. So I think he's seen an angle case he did. And it's gas because he described himself as a socialist, and he's sort of just morphing into something else. Like I remember him on Dragon's Den, or what was it, Dragon's Den?
Yeah,
He had more of an American accent than a Derry accent. Now he has his own sweet little Derry accent back again.
Same tactic that Hillary Clinton used when she was speaking to the black people. She put on a southern drawl.
Totally. So he's not.
So he's power grabbing.
Yeah. So and he's not. So there's there's people on the left I like, and there's people on the right. Like for instance, in the EU elections, I'm going to give Herman Kelly my number one, even though he's against Travel ethnicity. But what his thing was, what he said was about that, there's Irish like the rest of us. And I understand that, but unfortunately we weren't allowed to be Irish, so we had to go for that. That we weren't allowed that. Okay, we have been second-class citizens in this country, so unfortunately we had to find a goal in order to get some sort of protection, even though there's no protection because it's not legally binding. Okay, but he's going to get me number one because I'm so anti-EU, and I think he's the most respectable out of all the anti-EU candidates, and that's why he's going to get it for me.
Jesus, and I want to.
But we'll do it again anyway.
No, I want to squeeze this one in.
Yeah.
Because it's recent. What do you think about the fact that RTA are only giving the independent candidates? Now just let me finish it. So the American audience, that the RTA, the main the state broadcaster is only allowing candidates that are part of political parties the quantifiable time, 10 or 15 minutes, to express the debate, where the non-party candidates, independent candidates throughout the country, which there are many, do your due diligence, ask, vote with your conscience. But they're only given a 1 minute slot and not allowed to express themselves fully.
It's absolutely disgraceful, and they're afraid of certain people. Like if you look at Herman Kelly, I'll go back to him, and it's why he's getting me number one. Even though there's a local candidate here, he's a shinner though. Larry O'Toole, I would have traditionally voted him, but they're turned into EU loyalists, so I can't do it. My whole idea of voting in this is I'm voting for someone who's going to go over and mess up Europe. I don't even care about any other policy, even though there's policies I won't agree with Herman Kelly. I don't care about any other. I only care about the most capable person who's going to mess up Europe. And they're afraid to get someone like him because he's a very articulate and smart fella. I've watched a lot of his interviews. Again, I'm not going to agree with him on everything, but he's smart, he's articulate, and he doesn't give in debate, he doesn't lose his temper. He's a good debater, and I think they're afraid of people like him. And listen, we are the most pro. I think we did the poll the other day where we're the second most pro EU. Like, we are brainwashed.
No,
we are the most.
They think we're brainwashed because they're afraid of people like you, me, Herman, and all the other great patriots out there, and female patriots. That patriots is an inclusive word, male and female. Just totally. John,
anyway,
appreciate that.
No,
great interview.
Yeah.
As I said, I'm sure there's going to be more conversations there. Some great stuff. And I'm glad to hear the perspective against Peter Casey, because another voice that John represented there that wasn't able to give a retort or an answer to his criticism. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, press the like button, press the subscription button and the little blue bell, and you'll be reminded of future conversations on the Grand Torino.
Cool.